What's going on, everybody? Nick Whalen, Alex Barutha here. Monday, December 23rd edition of the RotoWire Fantasy Basketball Podcast. Obviously, we have today's episode ongoing. We'll have an episode coming for you on Christmas Eve as well. Going to set the table for a big Christmas Day slate in the NBA. But we'll recap the weekend as we typically do. We'll get into some waiver wire ads, some players trending up and down, and we'll take as many questions as we can. Already got some good ones floating around in the chat. So get those questions in and we'll hit them throughout the show. Alex, not a huge waiver wire week for me. We kind of talked about it in our weekly waiver video, which you could find on the RotoWire Fantasy Basketball YouTube channel each and every week. In somewhat of a holding pattern. I mean, most teams have played so few games over the last couple of weeks that, save for a few new injuries, like not a ton has changed. The schedule will pick up in earnest in the coming week. We got a ton of teams with 4-game weeks, ton of teams with 3-game weeks, only a handful of teams playing twice in the week ahead. But I saw you making some moves in the RotoWire Stake League last night. Dropping Precious Achiuwa, picking up our guy Noah Clowney, dropping Micic, picking up Chris Dunn. Just kind of working some of the margins in that 8-cat league.
Yeah, I picked up Achiuwa because I really need to get a forward, and part of me was like, I don't have to drop him, but I also thought like this is, the sort of lull we've been in from a schedule standpoint because of the NBA Cup. I felt like gave me and maybe everybody a little bit of an opportunity to think about longer term waiver wire options. If you're not desperate for, like, if your team isn't super injured, and I have Brandin Ingram on my IR for what that's worth. But yeah, I felt like, Clowney, he's been getting some more action lately. Obviously, the Nets have been there. They started with the Schroeder trade, but I think they're really going to start pushing more towards the tanking situation. And obviously, Clowney's going to be a beneficiary of that. And then Chris Dunn was just like, Micic's value is pretty much gone. And so I just wanted someone a little more stable on my bench. And Chris Dunn at least gives you those steals every single night.
Yeah, speaking of the Nets, I think that's the team that I've been trying to extract some value from. And like you said, I think a lot of it is almost more long-term, trying to forecast, okay, Schroeder's gone. Who else could be gone from this roster a month from now? Could be Dorian Finney-Smith, who's already banged up this week. He's going to miss at least one game to begin the week. It's a 4-gamer for Brooklyn. They play tonight against Miami. They play Thursday, Friday, back-to-back, Milwaukee and San Antonio. And then they get the Orlando Magic in Orlando on Sunday afternoon. I'm not a Ben Simmons guy, Alex. I do everything I can to keep him off my rosters, but he's now started 3 games in a row. He's played in 6 consecutive games. That is a season high for Ben Simmons. And he's looked pretty good. I got to hand it to him. He's looked pretty good. I think we kind of have to recalibrate, what your expectations are for Simmons relative to his peak years in Philly before everything that's happened. If you're in a 9-cat league, the turnovers have been killing you lately. He's got at least 5 turnovers in 3 straight games, but the counting stats have been there. 12 points, 5 rebounds, 8 assists, over a steal per game over these last 3. And I think most importantly, the minutes have been there. Even earlier in the year when he was kind of in and out, he was maxing out at like 25, 26 minutes most nights, and he's played 31, 32, 29 over these last 3.
Yeah, I don't really know if he's been a more effective real life player, because you mentioned the turnovers are kind of absurd right now. Although I think anybody running playmaking duties on this Nets team would probably rack up their fair share of turnovers. But yeah, you have to. I think you just have to add him in a standard 12-team league. He's just too good at filling up box score stats for him to be ignored.
There was one interesting ad drop in the Stake League, which if you're new to the program, 16-team category league. So, we're not, you're excited when you're picking up the Chris Dunns and the Corey Kisperts of the world. So we are kind of speaking relatively here, but I thought one interesting move is somebody dropped Alex Caruso to pick up Spencer Dinwiddie. And, maybe Luka misses more time. We'll see. Mavs play on Christmas Day. I wouldn't be shocked if Luka didn't play tonight. I don't see him missing time beyond that. I think there's going to be a big push for him to be out there on Wednesday. But do you like that move? Like, I know Caruso's not really giving you much offensively, but obviously there's still a lot there with the defensive numbers. And I worry with Dinwiddie, it was played 2 pretty decent back-to-back games, but I think in a lot of ways his value is tethered directly to Luka.
Yeah, Caruso just signed that 4-year, $81 million extension.
Yep.
But I think if you don't need the steals, there's like no reason to roster Caruso. It's just like in a category league, I really don't. You just don't have to. Even a 16-teamer. And Dinwiddie, he was horrible to start the season, and I thought he was like done. But I think he sort of he rounded into shape when either Kyrie or Luka missed time, or both of them I know were out for a stretch. And he's had a couple bad games here and there, but I think that's given him enough confidence, and it's given Jason Kidd enough confidence in him to where it's like, it feels like his new baseline is like 20 minutes a game. And with upside for, you could get you 10 and 5 on any given night. And maybe, I mean, Kyrie's missed a lot of time throughout his career as well. Like, I think there'll be enough opportunities for Dinwiddie, to where that ad drop makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, you got to live with the hot and cold streaks. And even when he's coming off the bench, like, he's still had a couple 20-plus point nights, where he gets hot and the minutes are there. He's also like 3 of his last 24 from beyond the arc, so there's going to be those wild swings. But I will say, I mean, he's had three steal games in his last 4. So, obviously it's not going to be as consistent night to night as you're getting with Caruso, but for the most part, those have been there. If you kind of divide his season into 2 parts, like you said, he was horrific to begin the year, but his last 13 games, he's given you 13 points, 3 rebounds, 5 assists, 1.3 steals, 1.8 threes. In a 16-team league, I think you can absolutely live with that. So that's a good defense by you of making that move. I want to get out ahead of I assume we'll get questions about Cole Anthony at some point, who went off on Saturday. Obviously, no Franz, no Banchero, no Suggs in that game either. I saw a bunch of people went out and added Cole Anthony over the weekend. And, if you're in a deeper league, rightfully so, I think you got to chase that. But Magic ended up winning 121-114 over the Heat on Saturday. Just very weird box score. Like, nobody really did anything except for KCP had by far his best game of the season, 24 points, 2 rebounds, 2 blocks, and 2 assists. And then Cole Anthony takes 25 shots off the bench for 35, 9, and 8 with a steal and a block.
I was watching some of that game when Suggs got hurt, and I turned it off. Of course, I was like, "Oh, there's other games I can watch after Suggs gets hurt," and then of course they make the huge comeback. This is tough because if Cole Anthony, I feel like he would have been doing this already. You know what I mean? And if Suggs isn't going to miss any time, any extended amount of time, I think there's just a possibility that Cole Anthony goes back to playing like 10, 15 minutes a game and just not being relevant at all in fantasy.
I think this is going to be a massive outlier game. Like, he's done nothing close to this at any point this season when the minutes have been there. You mentioned the wild comeback for Orlando. Outscored Miami 37-8 in the fourth quarter. 37-8. And a lot of that was Cole Anthony. I mean, he's only had 4 other double-digit scoring games on the season, and none of those have exceeded 16 points. So, if you did have him out there, especially in a daily league, if you were able to swap him in, like, that's fantastic. But I don't know that this is an indication of things to come. It feels like he's kind of somebody, despite their injuries, who's almost fallen out of favor already.
I mean, he kind of has. I mean, his minutes have declined for 3 straight years, and with all of the, you think about all of the uncertainty that has been around Orlando's backcourt for the past 3-4 years, the fact that Cole Anthony had all the opportunity in the world and just could not get on the right side of the coaching staff kind of tells you. And like, of course he could. I mean, Suggs misses some time. You never know. Like, maybe Cole Anthony he can start playing a little bit more and be more consistent. But I would not bank on that. It's fine as a short-term ad. Like, I don't hate the idea of being like, oh, is the worst guy on my bench, does he not have this much upside? Am I not starting this guy? Like, I'll just drop it for Cole Anthony and see what happens. But like you said, to me, it's no confidence long-term.
We only had 3 games in the NBA on Sunday, but one of those was Pacers Kings, and Kings fallen into a bit of a rut over the last few weeks. Like this, I don't know, man. I don't know. They're 13-17. They've now lost 4 in a row. Lost by 1 to the Nuggets, lost back-to-back games to the Lakers, and then got blown out by Indiana at home yesterday, 122-95. I do want to do just a general Tyrese Haliburton check-in. Like, do you feel any differently, any better about Haliburton now than you would have, even a week or 2 ago? Because it feels like every pod, we have to kind of reassess this, and the efficiency's been better. You look at his last 10 games, he's shooting almost 50% from the field. The 3-point shooting is back up, but the overall numbers, 18.5 points, just over 8 assists, 1 steal. It's still not quite what you thought you were getting.
No, I mean, October was a complete disaster for him from an efficiency standpoint. But you mentioned it. I mean, he's in December, he is playing a lot better. last year he averaged 20 and 11. This year in December right now he's averaging 19 and 9, which it's lower than what you wanted, but I think we've gotten past the point where we can say that if you pick Tyrese Haliburton like 5th in your fantasy league, that he is absolutely the reason that you are not doing well in fantasy. I think he's been good enough recently to where if you're doing poorly in fantasy, it's probably for other reasons, and and in terms of like him as a player, you're right. I mean, he just isn't as involved. That is true. Like McConnell has been really involved. Mathurin's taken over some usage. Nembhard is back and taking on some stuff. Siakam obviously does his thing. So like, yes, it is a disappointing season, but I still think like Haliburton could finish out the season and his first, 15, 20 games are mostly a blip.
He ranks 33rd in 8-cat per game value on the year. So that puts him in the same general zone as like Donovan Mitchell, Tyler Hero, Tyrese Maxey, Dyson Daniels, Alperen Şengün. Feels like reasonable company, considering where it felt like the season was going. Like you're not getting 75th overall value from a guy that you took with the 7th pick. I think you can live with this and hope that it continues to trend in the right direction. But you're right about the usage. I mean, like the crazy high volume nights have not really been there. And obviously, he's not a 30 point per game guy, but even just the volume assist nights have been a little bit more hit or miss. Like he was somebody that it felt like was giving you double-digit assists pretty much every night for a while last season. And that's somewhat returned, but those big splash games have been a little bit fewer and further between. Where are you at on Mathurin, by the way? I had somebody ask last week about potentially dropping Ben Mathurin, which it feels like he's having a really good year, which he is. Almost 17 points per game, 6 rebounds. But I think there may be a case to be made that it's been a better real life season than a fantasy season. In a 16 teamer, obviously you're not dropping him. I wouldn't do it in a 14, but he's not really giving you anything on defense, not giving you any assists. Where do you come in on him?
I mean, his fantasy game was being upheld by his crazy efficient shooting and his rebounding.
Yeah.
And that the rebounding hasn't fallen too badly, but it's really like, since he is he really is mostly like a one category guy, which is points. And so when his efficiency falls like it has, I mean, in his past 7 games, he's shooting 37% from the field for 11 points. Now the minutes are still there, which is encouraging. I would say if you don't need points, you could probably just drop him, because he's not really giving you too much else that you couldn't find off the waiver wire. But it's still hard because he had such a good stretch earlier.
He's 5 of his last 30 from beyond the arc. So that's a big part of it. In general, not a crazy high volume 3-point shooter. He's been about at that same level for 3 years now. It's given you like 3.7 attempts per game on average. I will say though, he takes enough free throws that in category leagues, that's a pretty big boost.
True.
He's 85% free throw shooter. That's a couple percentage points better than he's been in the last couple of years. And he's, that was one thing that really declined year over year from his rookie year to his sophomore year. He was almost averaging 6 free throw attempts a game as a rookie, which is crazy. And then, was down closer to 3.5 last year, now back up to 4.7, hitting him at 85%. So yeah, to me, I basically told the guy, like, it depends what you need. He's kind of a unique fantasy player in that way. He's a guard who rebounds, gives you the efficient stats. But if you're hunting defensive stats, if you're hunting high volume threes, maybe not somebody to look into. Let's start hitting some questions from the chat. I got a lot of good ones here. Kool-Aid Trippin says, is Donte back? Is Donte back? And then another question just below that. Do I pick up Donte DiVincenzo or Brandin Podziemski? Got to pick up a white guy.
Is Donte back? I mean, I don't know. He shot really well the past couple games, and you have to be wary when it's like a guy had a couple good games because he shot 60% from the field,
right,
or whatever. And I did try to pick him up in a league for schedule reasons, but I would not necessarily declare he is back as badly as the Wolves need him to be back. And if you're talking about him or Podziemski, Podziemski had a couple good games. Again, he's had a couple good games, a couple points this season. He's also had terrible stretches at points this season. So I wouldn't treat either of these guys as more than streamers. So whoever fits your roster or your schedule, for the upcoming week, I think you just pick that guy up.
I would give a slight lean to DiVincenzo. I think there's going to be more stability there. You look at the big game that Podziemski had the other night, 21, 6 and 4 with 2 steals. That was the game where they were down 60 to the Grizzlies. So that was not a normal game. Steph Curry played like 24 minutes or something like that. So I don't know how much I would take from that. Still feels like in general, Podziemski's kind of fallen out of favor with the Warriors. Now, I think it's possible he's traded. And, if he were to end up in a situation where there's minutes available, maybe he has higher upside the rest of the way, because I don't see that happening with DiVincenzo. But if we're assuming that these situations remain static, I think I would lean DiVincenzo. Christian Rogers asks, is Cason Wallace a hold for his defensive stats?
Yeah, we've talked a lot about Cason Wallace on the Friday waiver wire show, and I think you and I on Thursdays have also talked about Cason Wallace. And yeah, I think if you need the defensive stats, it's fine. Now, he had 2 games where he only played 21 and 23 minutes, and then you get this news about the Caruso extension, kind of lining up with that, and it's a fair like eyebrow raiser. Depends how desperately you need the defensive stats. I would not drop yet, but like if next week Wallace is still playing like 20 minutes a game, then he can probably be dropped.
Yeah, last 10 games, he's given you 1.6 steals, 1.2 blocks. I mean, the blocks, especially from a guard, from somebody of that size, are super valuable. But like you said, there is some redundancy there, because he and Caruso basically do the exact same thing, which is part of the reason OKC is so good defensively. But yeah, you're right. There's a difference. For a lot of that stretch, he was in the starting lineup. He was playing, 27 to 33 minutes. And if he's sitting most often in the 21 to 23 range, that's going to be tough. All right. Is Lu Dort a good ad for this week in a 14-team 9-cat league?
What is OKC's schedule this week? Do they play 4 times?
That is a great question, Alex. And they play 4 games. They play the Wizards tonight. They play the Wizards. They play at the Pacers, at Charlotte, and then home against Memphis on Sunday. So pretty good schedule.
Yeah, I mean, on a 4-game week, sure. I mean, grab Lu Dort. I mean, he's got, his past 6 games, he's averaging 2 steals. He can do enough in his other categories like rebounds and threes. It's not necessarily always consistent, but when you're balancing it out you're totaling his stats over 4 games, yeah, for sure. You stream them in.
All right, we got kind of a 2-parter here from Paul. He says, I have SGA, Simons, Powell, Grant, Avdia, Brown, Lively, Cat, LaMelo, Vassell, Valanciunas, D'Lo, DeRozan, and Koulibaly on my IL Plus 12-team 9-cat league. I don't think I have anybody to comfortably drop, but he wants to open up a spot for streaming. Which 2 of these players can I package and trade away? So yeah, well, basically, which of the 2 are you the least high on of that list? And for those watching along on YouTube, which you should be, you can see the list here. I don't want to read through all those names again.
Look, I don't really believe in Valanciunas long term. And I don't really Grant and Avdia, that's tough. Like anybody on the Blazers to me is just like flip a coin whether they'll be horrible or good the rest of the season. So if you could find a way to like trade Valanciunas and Jeremy Grant and get literally anything resembling a consistent potentially startable player, I would just do it.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up Avdia, because it has been kind of a stunning reversal. Like I was fully out on Avdia like 10 games into the year. He's barely playing. He was out of the starting lineup. He just had a ton of just nothing games. And he's been quite a bit better, really over the last calendar month. 15 points, 6 rebounds, 3 assists, almost a steal per game, giving you threes, giving you good percentages. Like you said, you got to be wary of Portland in general. The other name that jumps out to me here is D'Lo, for obvious reasons. He's been a little bit better of late. You look at his last 7 or 8, there's a couple splash games in there. LeBron also missed 2 games. Austin Reeves missed some time. On balance, I think I'd be pretty comfortable letting him go, especially if we're talking trade versus drop here.
Yeah. I mean, if you could, D'Lo, Jeremy Grant, Valanciunas, no confidence in any of those guys. If you can deal them for anything, I think you just do it.
Mike weighing in, he says, will Norman Powell keep up his production with Kawhi Leonard coming back? A good question. And to give us a refresher on Kawhi, he's been ruled out for the Clippers 3-game road trip, which concludes tonight against Memphis. So really for the first time this season, it's conceivable that Kawhi Leonard could play within the next week. Their next game is Friday at home against Golden State. After that, they have a back-to-back Monday, Tuesday. So even if he does come back, he's not playing both halves of that. But they're clear for another back-to-back until mid-January. This discussion starts with just like, what do you expect out of Kawhi? Is how close of a Zion situation is this? Where it's like, okay, he's back, but how often is he playing? How many minutes is he playing? How many games is he playing before he's back on the injury list? It's impossible to say. But in general, and any night that Kawhi is out there, I don't think Norman Powell is still going to be giving us 23 a night.
There is probably now if you're in a league with savvy managers or people who just like really pay attention to NBA news, it might be hard to trade Powell. But I would say this is probably the best time to trade Powell right now because he's coming off of 3 really good games, 29 points, 28 points. And if you can trade him now with managers looking at that game log with Kawhi Leonard's return, quote unquote, imminent, your chances of getting burned, are so much smaller than it was earlier in the year. Like if you would have sold high on Powell, like 8 games into the season, you would have lost out on a lot of great games from him. But I think if you can sell now, then I would just do it.
All right. Well said. DJ says, "What's up, fellas? Thanks for all y'all do. I need to trade Randle because it feels like he will be bad all year." I agree. I feel like this weekend is when I think the tides like officially turn. I saw more anti-Randle tweets over the last 48 hours. And, I feel like a lot of us have been on this for a while, but it really feels like sentiment has shifted. Somebody posted like an 8-minute supercut of like Julius Randle poor effort videos. It was amazing. Anyway, DJ asks, like he says, Randle feels like he's going to be bad all year. What's a reasonable trade option to try to get? So basically, what kind of player can you get for Julius Randle right now?
Yeah, so to set the scene, Randle and 8-cat is about 75th per game.
Yep.
I don't think he's getting any better. I mean, I agree with you, DJ. It's just like, what's the scenario in which he starts playing better? There's probably more scenarios in which the team is like, I've just had it. Like the team has just had it. The coach has had it, and they just play him less. Fewer touches. So I think if you can just get any top 75 player back, you just pull the trigger. Especially if it's a top 75 player that has any sort of floor to his game. Like if you could swap him for Desmond Bane, maybe that's an option. If you could swap him. Now, I don't know. This could be a my problem for your problem trade. I have plenty of concerns about this guy. But if you walk up to the Lauri Markkanen fantasy owner and say, I got a Julius Randle for you to solve your problem, that might be something because we know Markkanen has more upside than Randle, technically. But yeah, it's that type, Siakam, that type of player. Now it's going to be hard to get that player from the other manager, but I don't know. Do you have any options, Nick, that would be like maybe someone lower than Randle on the rankings that you feel like could, you're coming to another manager who has like Christian Braun or who has like Jalen Green or something, and you're like,
I think Fred VanVleet fits the my problem for your problem guy. Your Fred VanVleet manager, myself included, probably not like super thrilled with how that's going. It's and like for as bad as Randle is, like he's still giving you 27 and 4 every night.
He gets his numbers.
He gets his numbers. Yeah. So like you're not just selling this like nothing asset. Like I don't feel like you have to dump him for like the 130th ranked guy. Right. I think you could look at it's like this feels like you're taking a loss, but like if Ivica Zubac, talk about a guy with a floor. Like you're not getting the same ceiling, but you're getting basically the same thing every single night from Ivica Zubac. And guy plays like 80 games every year. It's the different stat profile, of course. You're going to take a pretty big hit in points. You're not getting the threes. I get all that, but if you just want a more stable asset, I mean, those guys are pretty comparable as far as the 8-cat value they provided this year. So those are some just general names you could shoot for. All right. LALTOTH. Don't know how to pronounce this. He says, when Zion and Cam Thomas are back, which of these players should I drop? Or should I say if they ever come back? Zach Edey, Christian Braun, Ben Simmons, Daniel Gafford, Grady Dick, or Kelly Oubre?
I think Oubre is. I'd be fine to drop Oubre. I would say the guys that most likely I'd want to keep would be Zach Edey and Christian Braun, the first two guys you listed. And then again, Ben Simmons, you never know. Like, he's playing well now, but when Cam Thomas comes back, maybe not. Gafford, his minutes have been decreasing. At the same time, he's such a good per minute guy. It's hard to be like, well, I'll just drop him. Because if Lively gets hurt, then it's like, well, Gafford's going to be playing 25 a night, a monster. And Grady Dick, I mean, when the Raptors are healthy, he's kind of a fringe player, but when they're not healthy, which is pretty much all the time, it seems like, then you got to roster him.
All right, we'll hit some more questions on the other side, but first, we got a message from our friends at DraftKings Pick 6. Here at RotoWire, we're proud to be partnered up with DraftKings Pick 6 this NBA season. Think your team will score more than 100 points tonight? How about your favorite point guard making more than 4 3-pointers? Check out DraftKings Pick 6, the newest way to play fantasy basketball and win cash with DraftKings. Here's how it works. All you got to do is pick 2 to 6 players of the same sport and choose if they'll have more or less of a given stat. So for hoops, we're talking points, assists, rebounds, etc. Lock in those picks, compete against opponents for your shot at huge cash prizes. Go download the new DraftKings Pick 6 app right now and use our code ROTOPICK, ROTOPICK. That's code ROTOPICK for new Pick 6 customers. Play $5, get $50 in Pick 6 credits guaranteed. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org in Connecticut. Must be 18 plus. Age and eligibility restrictions vary by jurisdiction. Pick 6 not available everywhere, including New York and Ontario. Void where prohibited. 1 per new customer. Bonus awarded as non-withdrawable Pick 6 credits that expire in 30 days. Limited time offer. See terms at pick6.draftkings.com/promos. All right, back to the chat where we have a ton of great questions stacking up. Alex Kool-Aid Trippin asks, what do you guys think of Kel'el Ware? Is he worth considering right now?
I considered him in the 16-team stake league we're in.
Yeah.
Just because he had a nice game the other night against Orlando and had a couple highlight blocks, a nice dunk. I think, Eric Spoelstra is searching in his rotation. That is for sure. Been playing a lot of Drew Smith, who I also think is worth picking up. There were some absences in that game, like Jimmy Butler didn't play against Orlando, and Kevin Love was out. I think it was a personal reasons, but don't drop anybody significant for him. But if you can find a way to add him, I think I would explore that. Yeah.
I'm interested. I mean, he was somebody that was taken with the last pick in a lot of deeper drafts a couple of months ago, thinking that he might walk into a role right away. And I think, in general, he's just not quite as ready as we thought. He's only played, I know he was in the G League for a while, just came back this past week, and he's only played 2 G League games, but he's blocked 7 shots in those games. He's averaging, 19 points and 10 rebounds. So I think against G League competition, he's looking like the guy we thought he would be. I think maybe where I went wrong in thinking that he would be a piece for them right away is like the Heat have higher standards than a lot of teams. And like, I think if you're not where you need to be, like basketball IQ wise, you're not just going to step into a role, even if the other option is Kevin Love and, Pell Larson and guys like that, who Spoelstra seems to like. So I think at some point he'll get his chance, right? I mean, there's not a ton of obvious roadblocks other than Bam, and nobody ever thought Kel'el Ware was going to be the starting center this year anyway. I will say I read a report this past week that Miami is looking for some sort of big man. They want to play Bam more at the 4. It's like, you might have that guy who you just took in the first round right here. So I don't know if they just don't think he's ready. I mean, I don't know. It's like, you'd have to be in a pretty deep league right now, I think, to feel good about ever putting him in a lineup in the next month or so. Like, it's one thing to hold him if you have an extra spot, but like how many games in a row of him playing enough minutes would you have to see before you're like, all right, I'll actually lock him in a weekly league?
I mean, he probably needs 20 minutes to be fantasy relevant. So it's like, you need to at least see that, but
right.
You're right. I mean, it's the fact that Spoelstra keeps tinkering with the rotation and that, generally speaking, has not included throwing Kel'el Ware in there, kind of tells you where the organization thinks he's at. But at the same time, I don't know. I mean, he's so intriguing from a fantasy standpoint. You don't want to miss the boat.
All right, got a good question about Tari Eason. Kenny asked, do I hold Tari Eason or drop him to pick up Klay Thompson in a 9-cat 10-team head-to-head league?
Yeah, I mean, he is going to miss his third game in a row today, Monday.
Yep.
Didn't he have a lower leg thing last year? Am I mistaken? Played 22
He missed a
games
lot of
last
time
year.
last year.
Yeah. Drop him to pick up Klay. I mean, if you need points and threes, sure. I think that's okay. But if you're looking for anything else, I don't think I would drop Eason just yet.
We talked about the Sacramento Kings a bit earlier in the show. Alejandro says this week was god awful for the Kings, and specifically DeMar DeRozan. He's not wrong about that. DeRozan coming off of that 2-point effort against Indiana yesterday. Should I be concerned about DeRozan for the rest of the season?
Did you read that sort of weird report in The Athletic from Sam Amick, and I can't remember who else was like the contributing author to that, about was it Rich Paul being at the Kings game the other night, and now there's a bunch of questions about what's the future of this franchise. And
oh yeah,
it was kind of
Fox stuff. Yeah,
some De'Aaron Fox stuff coming out of there, and now DeRozan's not playing very well, and they're losing games. It's getting a little weird in Sacramento, I would say. Am I concerned about DeRozan? I think the most concerning thing about the past 4 games has been that his free throws are way down. I mean, he's his past 4 games, he's averaging 2 free throws a game. I mean, that's where he makes his living, is at the line. 6, 7 free throws a game. I have to admit, I haven't like dug into it and like watched, like how uninvolved is he actually, what exactly is going on. But I think I would say there's some light concern at this point. I have DeRozan in the 16-team league. It sucks right now.
Yeah, it's been a bad stretch. I would say, historically DeRozan has been like as consistent as any non-superstar. So I think there's a pretty good chance we'll look back on this as somewhat of a blip. And I almost just have more concerns about the Kings in general. Like I read that same report you did, and it's basically centered around like, hey, what's the plan here? From Rich Paul,
right.
Like just met with Kings organization before that game against the Lakers on Thursday. There's already been, some potential connection of Fox and Toronto. I don't know. We'll see. But Fox had an opportunity to sign an extension this past year and passed on that. And, he's still got 1 more year left. But as we know, it's like, this is when those talks start to happen. It's not when you go into that final year, it's the year before. So that's something to monitor. If they, obviously you could get a lot more for Fox or Sabonis than you could DeRozan. So I don't know. Maybe there's a world in a roundabout way where this works out well for DeRozan. Like if they trade De'Aaron Fox, all of a sudden, he kind of moves up the ladder a little bit. But I don't know. In general, I think DeRozan will end up being fine. Just a very weird week for the Kings as they try to figure out who they are. 2 of our favorite guys here, Alex. Good question from James. Noah Clowney or Kelly Olynyk?
Rest of season, I probably have to go with Clowney, because both of these teams appear to be heading towards the gutter very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
The Raptors are 7-22, and the Nets are 11-17. Shout out to Jordy Fernandez, who can't stop winning. But neither of these teams want to win, and the reality is when March and April come around, Olynyk is going to be the guy with the back soreness, and Clowney is going to be the guy who's probably playing 30 minutes a game. So I would hold and stash Clowney now if you can between those two.
Speaking of DeMar DeRozan, Franco asked, DeMar and Brandon Miller for Scotty Barnes. Is this a trade you would make?
I understand this trade because Barnes is, the best player in the deal. I don't know if I can quite give up that many counting stats between DeMar and Brandon Miller for Scotty.
Also, just worry about Scotty Barnes. Already been hurt twice. Raptors season does not appear to be heading in a non-tanking direction, is one way that I would put it. So I think Scotty Barnes, to me, like he doesn't strike me as somebody who would like to be shut down, and maybe the Raptors don't even need to do that to get where they want. But not that Charlotte and Sacramento are like great situations right now either, but I would worry a little bit about that late season viability when it comes to Barnes. Another Scotty Barnes related question here from Chris. He says, I trade Garland, Monk, and Dosunmu for Scotty Barnes in a 9-cat league. I have Kawhi on my IR spot. Was this a good trade?
I think that's okay. Garland, Garland has his games, but with Mitchell's still the number one guy there, and Evan Mobley's taking on more usage, and Monk and Dosunmu. I mean, Monk's playing more and he's seeing more time. That's an interesting deal. I think you could come out fine. I'm not sure I would have pulled the trigger on it, but I don't hate the idea of what you're doing.
Yeah, I think this is fine. I think it's fine. There's certainly a world in which you might regret the Dosunmu part. If and when the Bulls move on from some players, and it really more than anything depends on who they would bring back in a Vooch or Levine deal. But there's certainly a world in which Dosunmu is playing a ton of minutes later in the season. Another good here, Goga Batadze or Alex Sarr for the rest of the season. Both these guys running hot lately.
I may actually have to go with Batadze here. Just because I think starting in November, man, it's just he's been their best center all year. Far. He's way better than Wendell Carter Jr. Now Mo Wagner's done for the year with a torn ACL, which sucks.
Yeah,
but I don't really see Batadze's role changing that much when Banchero and Franz Wagner come back, and he might score a little bit less, but he's just, I don't know. He just feels like he's a crucial part of their team. And I will say, at least, the part about this with Sarr, like you mentioned, Sarr is playing better. Past 10 games, 14.7 boards, a block and a half. Shooting efficiency is up. He's 41% from 3 on 5 attempts a game. Both are interesting. I think I would lean Batadze, but pure ceiling, it's got to be Sarr, though, right? I mean, like 35 minutes a game, ceiling. That's a tough question.
I think the big difference between these two is like Sarr at least gives you threes. He's hitting 2 threes a game over the last 10. He's taking 5, 6 a game in that span, hitting him at over 40%. So that's like the key differentiator. Other than that, they're both centers. They both score. They give you rebounds, etc. But you're not getting any threes out of Batadze. But honestly, the Mo Wagner injury is huge because I think that really gives Batadze a floor going forward. Even once Franz is back, once Banchero's back, Wendell Carter still going to be scratching around in that rotation. But I mean, you're basically pulling 16 to 20 minutes out of there now with Mo Wagner, and Batadze doesn't need 33 minutes a night to be relevant. So I tend to play it a little bit safer like you, and I think I would lean Batadze. All right, we'll hit a few more, then we'll get out of here. Joe says, what's achievable for a Siakam and John Collins package? Specifically looking for a bump in assists and blocks.
Siakam and John Collins. He's been good. Collins has been good. I mean, so in this entire season, Collins is ranked 40th in 8-cat. Siakam is like in the 60s. I mean, you got to shoot for above 40, obviously, if that's the case. You're looking for assists and blocks. That's a weird combination.
Yeah, I know. So if you're trying to pull off a 2-for-1, that's pretty tough.
I mean, is this like a Derek White?
That's exactly the name I was going to mention. And I don't know if I'd want to do that 2-for-1. I think you could do a 2-for-2 and just kind of do a, my categories for your categories type of trade.
Yeah, because you're not going to get it's hard to find one guy. You're not gonna get Cade Cunningham probably. And
Jalen Johnson.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, maybe like Jalen Johnson.
I think that's reasonable, right? You're giving up 2 good players. You're giving up 2 top 6 guys. Yeah. And to be clear, I think now would be the time to get off of Collins. He's played.
Yes,
this has been like the best 25 game stretch of his career, and all the same concerns that we have about Toronto and Charlotte and teams like that, those definitely apply to Utah.
Yeah, because Collins is 27. He's not 23 or 24. Like he's not necessarily part of their rebuilding development thing.
All right. So Evan says, kind of in need of scoring threes and assists. Do you think I should try and package Aaron Gordon and Terry Rozier for one of the following? Zach LaVine, Tyler Hero, Norman Powell, or Paul George?
Yeah, Short answer is yes. I mean, if you could get Hero or I think Hero is actually probably your best option.
Oh yes,
Uh,
I would take any of
and
those guys.
yeah, for sure, any of those guys.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we've been getting a lot of questions about Rozier, and I've been trying to dodge him because I'm just sick of him. But he's a throw-in at this point. You know, maybe there's you're playing in a league with like Terry Rozier's uncle or something, and there's like a big Rozier guy in the league. He had 23 the other night against Orlando. Butler was out. That was his best game probably of the entire season, to be honest. But it's been rough outside of that. Like everything is down. You know, usage rates way down, scoring's down, every possible category. So I'd be looking to get out of the Rozier business if you can. And all those guys you listed, I think are better individual fantasy players than Gordon and or Rozier. All right, we'll hit a couple more. Our guy Ant always coming with good questions. He says, "Hey fellas, Harden for Trae Young in a cat league."
Sure. Yeah, I mean they put up similar types of numbers.
Yep.
But I still kind of worry about Harden like getting hurt. It's just he's older now. And I know Trae Young's shooting has been kind of down. I mean, they're actually shooting both exactly 39% and almost have the exact same free throw percentage. I mean, their stats are very, very similar. Technically, I think you are losing that trade just on pure value, but I would be less worried about Trae Young getting hurt.
All right, we'll do two more and then get out of here. James says, "I got offered Kuzma for Powell in a 14-team Roto League. Do I do it?" So even with our discussion about Powell earlier, no?
Kuzma's almost like I don't even think about him. When he played, he was terrible. He was terrible when he played. And like,
yeah,
they're probably
bad the preseason too.
They're going to try to trade him. If he's going to get traded somewhere and his usage is going to go way down or his minutes are going to go way down or both. I would just hang on. I mean, I still think a worst case for Norman Powell is like an efficient 18 points per game with like 3 assists or something, which is fine.
Jarrett Allen and Fred VanVleet for Anthony Edwards. Is this reasonable?
Jarrett Allen and Fred VanVleet for Ant reasonable. I think that's reasonable. Yeah, if you want to get off Fred VanVleet, I think that's fine.
Yeah. No, I think that's fine. I mean, I love Jarrett Allen, just like a really nice foundation piece for any fantasy team. But if you're trying to get someone like Edwards, you know, you're not going to do it without giving up somebody that you're a little uncomfortable with. So I think this is fair. Victor says, "Please help me, Paul George or Jimmy Butler, category league."
Probably Paul George.
Yeah.
I think, I mean, Butler, they both have the same concerns, which is that they're old and injury prone. Yeah. But Butler is more likely going to get traded. I don't know what situation he gets traded into, but I think this is a fair question to ask. I think I would lean Paul George.
It's tough with PG because obviously first and foremost is the injury concern, but he's also just had more like way off games this year than in years past. Like he was so good last season for the Clippers. I think, you know, just like the general Kawhi stuff and load management kind of overshadowed just how good Paul George was a season ago. And, you know, he still had a handful of big time games, you know, had 33 against Charlotte the other night, but he scored 16 total points on 6 of 24 over the last 2 games. So like there's still just been these weird nights where he's seemingly healthy. Everything seems to be fine. And he's just not putting up those same numbers. But in general, I would lean Paul George. And I think, like you said, is there a realistic world where Jimmy Butler gets traded to a better situation than he's currently in?
Probably not. I mean, they're talking about the teams he's going to get traded to, and in my opinion, the most likely of those teams are Houston and Golden State. And you could probably you might be able to make the argument that Golden State's a better situation than Miami from a usage standpoint. But these guys have the same concerns to me.
Yeah, I would lean Paul George as well. Okay, we'll finish out on a high note here heading into the holidays. Would you drop Mike Conley to add Alex Caruso? We also had another question earlier asking someone asking if they should add Mike Conley. So what are we doing with Mike Conley?
He is done, man.
He might be cooked.
He's 37. You know, would I drop him for Alex Caruso? I think I might actually. I think I might. At least with Caruso, you're getting like the elite steals production. I know his minutes are kind of up and down, but so are Conley's. Like Conley's minutes game log is not any more encouraging than Alex Caruso's minutes game log. So I think that's a fine move.
I also think they've had to play Conley more than they want. Like they know where Mike Conley is in his career, but it's like they're getting so little out of the other options, including DiVincenzo and Dillingham, that like the plan is never for Conley to play 33 minutes ever, and he's had to every now and then. So like I think ideally it's like if DiVincenzo does come on, like Conley's sitting in that 20 to 25 range every night, which is just not going to be enough for him at this point. So yeah, I'm with you in a 14 team category league. I think just bank the steals that you could get with Caruso and hope that he starts taking more threes. Awesome questions as always, guys. We appreciate everybody chiming in the chat. Makes this a very fun, easy pod for Alex and I to do. We'll keep doing this every Monday throughout the NBA season. Like I said at the top, I'll be back with Brandon Kravitz tomorrow morning, 9:30 a.m. Central. We'll have a Christmas Eve episode for you, previewing the Christmas Day games, kind of talking about the rest of the week ahead. Are we doing waivers on Friday or no?
Nope, no Friday pod this week.
All right, no Friday pod. So like those guys, enjoy the holidays. We'll be back in full force next week.